coven. If you find you want more missing witches and this strange magic in your life, get our book. We poured our heart and brains and minds and all the magic we could find into it. We'd love to know what you think. We'd love to read your reviews on Amazon or Goodreads. And of course, the old rate, review, and subscribe means a lot. And support our sponsor at Foxglove Farm using offer code Missing Witches. Thanks. Love you. Bye.
You aren't being a proper woman, therefore you must be a witch. You must be a witch.
Listeners, witches, welcome back. Welcome back to the Missing Witches podcast. Welcome back to the Witches Found branch of the Missing Witches podcast, where we get to talk to brilliant humans about what they're thinking about. Today, Dr. Marina Magloire is here, and I'm so thrilled and excited. I'll let her do a proper introduction of herself, but just to say, she's an assistant professor of English at the University of Miami. I can see her now, and there's green leaves blowing in the warm wind behind her, and I can see just a cold frozen lake expanse in front of me, cracking at night as it begins to melt. Dr. Magloire is writing a spiritual history of Black feminism and Afro-diasporic religion, and I came upon her work while I was trying to learn more about the women and priestesses of the Haitian Revolution, especially the story of Cécile Fatiman at Bois Cayman and what that story means. And if you listened to our episode this week, then you heard me quote Dr. Magloire on those things. And now I have all the thrills of getting to meet a writer whose words and way of storytelling truly opened me up and taught me things. And I'm so honored. So thank you for being here.
Thank you, Risa, for inviting me and for that beautiful introduction. I don't really have anything to add to that.
Well, so since we've just met and our listeners are cozying in with us wherever they are, hopefully safe and cozy, and they're getting to know you too, I wondered if maybe you could just share a bit about you and what brought you to the work of spiritual history, of Black feminism, and maybe just what kinds of ideas and questions are on your mind today.
Well, I think what brought me to this subject, I think, was actually, it's actually a bit of a, I don't know if it's the most uplifting story, but what actually brought me to the subject was kind of like a sense of discomfort and alienation, I guess, was with what is supposed to be my culture. I guess a bit of background on me. My mom is from Martinique, which is a French Caribbean island, still a colony of France. My dad is from Venezuela, but he's half Haitian and half French. So I just have a lot of Black diasporic French and anti-French, I guess, like blood in my family. And because of the various migrations, forced migrations, consensual migrations to America, to Europe, etc., growing up, my parents were not Vodou practitioners of any kind or practitioners of any kind of Afro-diasporic magic. Nobody in my family does that. And as, I started learning about Afro-diasporic religion in graduate school, I think there was this kind of assumption on the part of my professors or, classmates that this was my culture and that I had this completely unalienated relationship to it. So, I guess just kind of, I think a big theme throughout my research is people like me, people who grew up in the US, mostly is who I focus on. I focus on kind of Black feminist histories by Black American writers, them having this kind of same feeling as me, like them traveling to Haiti and thinking that it's going to be like kumbaya, diasporic solidarity. And then they get there and they're like, oh, wow, I have to learn this culture from scratch. And it's not to say that it's not their culture, but it's not an uncomplicated relationship either.
No, that shit is not uncomplicated. There's a lot of layers of violence and confusion and loss and all of that. And so what are you writing about these days? What are you thinking about these days?
These days, I'm thinking a lot about Lucille Clifton, who I know I've shared with you, Risa, some work that I've written about her. I continue to be in touch with her eldest daughter, Sydney, who's starting an artist residency in Lucille Clifton's, in the Clifton family's house that they lived in Baltimore, from 1969 to 1980, but they have like rebought that house significantly after it was taken from them through foreclosure. So the family has kind of reclaimed that house, and that is the house where Lucille Clifton kind of developed her spiritual practice as a medium, starting just kind of simply with a Ouija board, and then kind of expanding out into automatic writing, into past life regressions, into these kind of like possession experiences as well. And according to Sydney, her daughter, the house is kind of the only place where that practice happened. So like it didn't happen before and it didn't happen after. I mean, Sydney thinks that her mom just kind of developed a more direct spiritual channel after moving. It's not to say that she didn't communicate with spirits anymore, but that kind of tangible family practice, it only happened in this house in Baltimore. So I'm thinking a lot about the house on Talbot Road in Baltimore that the Cliftons used to live in.
Have you spent time there?
No, I haven't. I just started this project during COVID, actually, and I haven't had the
wild. Yeah, I'd be interested to hear like how you feel when you're there, especially when you're spending so much time with Lucille Clifton's writing. Is she there? Is she going to talk to you? Okay, so then I need to know how you feel about being at this intersection of spirituality and religion, and we talk about witchcraft. I don't know how you feel about that term. And then like academia, like how does that sit for you?
I mean, I think I'm definitely like part of a long tradition of, or I don't know if I fit squarely into this. There's a lot of practitioner academics, actually. I think M. Jackie Alexander, who like in Pedagogies of Crossing, like straight up said in Pedagogies of Crossing, like I am co-writing. This book is ancestrally co-written. And that was very respected work that, like even non-believers and non-practitioners took very seriously. So I think that really opened the way for a lot of practitioner academics. I don't know if I necessarily consider myself a practitioner academic, not because I don't believe or don't have my own practice, but because I don't have a community. I don't have a spiritual community yet. I know Mambo Mode's community in Boston actually has a lot of like academic, like practitioner academic Black women who all practice Vodou as part of this congregation. I don't know. So I feel happy that there's precedent and that I didn't necessarily have to do the hard work of saying like, like this is a valid field of study and all that, or like the hard work of positioning myself as a Black person, because I think there's this way where sometimes in academia where it's just assumed that you as a Black person, like believe things, or I don't know, like I as a Black person, like believe things that, I don't know, like get to believe. I mean, just like kind of the same, I guess, phenomenon that I described when I was in grad school and was learning about Haiti. There's like this assumption that Black academics just are part and parcel of like the people that they are studying sometimes in other countries or in other historical time periods. So I don't know. Sorry, that's like a long tangled answer to that.
Oh my gosh. No, I want all your tangents about that because I think so many people can relate to this anyway, to the feeling of being like, what are we allowed to talk about? What do I have access to, and what communities can I let myself like kind of approach and feel a part of, and like, where do I get to have a spirituality if I don't have a community, or, and people making assumptions about all of us, and what that means about our faith and about what we're going to write about.
Yeah.
And that's my own like sort of blurry tangent in response. It's not super well thought out either.
Oh my goodness. I'm so glad. I mean, it's nice to feel understood in this feeling for sure.
Yeah. I mean, we talk to a lot of people who like maybe don't identify with the word witch, but or maybe they do, but it's like very private, or and a lot of people. I interviewed somebody yesterday who's like a food historian. Mm-hmm. Who's talking about like her relationship to kind of being witchy as coming from like a fermentation practice, like, and working with food, and how being like closer to food and closer to our experience with food is kind of a spirituality for her.
Oh, I love that. I love that.
Me too.
Oh, well, actually, that brings me to another thing. I think about like why I hesitate necessarily to call myself a practitioner, or I definitely would not call myself a witch. Just because, although I do, I definitely think even when people chose not to use the word witch, I think there's definitely like really distinct traditions of like Afro-diasporic witchcraft. Like I don't not use the term witch for myself because I think that it's like for white people or whatever, like definitely Black people do the practices that are associated with witchcraft. But I think to me, I feel like what I know of Afro-diasporic witchcraft is about changing, manipulating, intervening in the physical world, like your will having tangible effects in the physical world. And I don't know if I have those kinds of gifts necessarily. So I don't know. So that, for the longest time, I just thought that I was very spiritually opaque or something, like very spiritually dense, like I definitely respect and believe like everyone who's ever told me like about spirits communicating with them through a variety of channels. But I'm just like, I don't know if that's ever happened for me. But like kind of recently I started to think that maybe spirits communicate with me in the way that I feel comfortable, which is through archives and through books. Like I've definitely I've definitely read books where I have I feel like I've definitely read books where I have gotten such an expanded spiritual sense of the person behind them that it seems like, not everybody gets from that book. I guess it feels like some kind of like special insight that I've gotten either from an archive or from a book that, I know other people have visited those archives and read those books, but it doesn't seem like anybody has ever like felt that person's presence in the way that I do. But maybe that's egotistical to say. I don't know. Maybe that's narcissistic to say.
Well, first of all, we fucking love arrogance in a woman. It's one of the like quotes from one of the first witches we wrote about. Like, love that. But oh my God, yeah, I lit up when you were describing that. Like I totally relate to that way of experiencing a spirit or ancestors or ghosts or voices or whatever. Like for me, it was very clear, like, I was not comfortable with them, with whatever that feeling was. I was not comfortable with that feeling of like, that like I could be intruded upon or seeing a ghost. So that was a very clear, hard pass for me. I don't want that. Mm-hmm. And so then I felt like those experiences maybe became more accessible to me in reading and writing. And you definitely changed the material world with your writing, I would say. And I think, Clifton does as well.
Oh, thank you. Yeah.
That's a speech more than a question, though. Sorry.
I hope so, because as much as I feel like, as much as I feel like maybe with some regret that I don't often feel like I changed the material world, I do feel that the material world is so important, just like the space of this house that Lucille Clifton was creating this spiritual practice in, or like the space of, I'm the kind of person who like, if I study like a forgotten Black woman, writer, artist, performer, I will literally go to their grave. I will literally hang around where they lived, even if it's a parking lot now or whatever. And even, like sometimes, like when I've lived near cemeteries, and when I was in grad school in Durham, North Carolina, I used to live right across the street from a cemetery. And it was a Black cemetery under segregation, and it was just in complete disrepair. It was kind of like woods. It was basically woods with kind of like little tombstones covered in leaves that like you would occasionally see if somebody would come leaf blow, but otherwise they were just buried in leaves. And the tombstones were like cracking and falling over and stuff. But there was one grave of this woman called Hallie May Meadows. She lived from 1902 to 1919. I'm assuming maybe she died of the influenza pandemic in 1919. And her headstone just said, "Gone so soon," in very like faded writing. And Hallie May was like, I don't know. I mean, I still think about Hallie May. I don't know what exactly she was trying to tell me, but she was somebody who, she was somebody I would visit time and time again. I mean, she was somebody who like, it was like a neighbor or something. She was literally right across the street from my house. And, I would celebrate her birthday, celebrate her death day, leave her little things every once in a while. And although I don't know if I ever saw I don't know if there was ever some clear sign in my life of Hallie May responding or saying thank you or something, it's hard sometimes to feel like I simultaneously can't influence the physical world, but I get this kind of indefinable feeling being in a place where someone who has passed but is significant to me for whatever reason has been.
Yeah, there's something to that idea about being changed or lit up or possessed partially by like the bits of the story that we get from them, and partially by our own imagination, which is an incredibly powerful spirit in and of itself. So I'll take that. And which I'm going to use as a segue into a question about Bois Cayman. So you, in your piece about the protests in Miami, you sort of talk about how this moment in Bois Cayman, this story about Cécile Fatiman and whether she was there or she wasn't there and who was it and what actually happened. And then the importance of the story that kind of lives beyond, was she 16? Was she an old woman? So I sort of think about how that moment lives in story, and that's really important too. Can you talk about your own sort of research or relationship with that story, or just give us some insight on it?
Yeah. I mean, I think it is just kind of a really fundamental question about like Black women in the archive, especially like Black women who, who may or may not have been literate, Black women about whom like written official records that we've been taught to respect may or may not exist. And I mean, something that I actually really love about Cécile Fatiman or about the story of the mythology of Cécile Fatiman, and I feel the same way about Marie Laveau, for example, who I think there's like similar kinds of embroideries and conflicting stories about. It's like she was light-skinned, she was dark-skinned, she was fat, she was skinny, she was like, she walked on water, she didn't, like that kind of stuff. I feel like that, I don't know, I think kind of preserving the opacity, I guess, of the archive, like this idea that we are not ever going to know for sure. And for most Black women of this time period, we are never going to have some entirely quote unquote accurate like insight into their subjectivity. I think I actually really love the embroidery and the uncertainty, because at the end of the day, that exists alongside all these kind of uncertainties around Black women of the time period, where it's like they appear in the archive. Saidiya Hartman says, like, at the moment of their disappearance, they appear in the archive because something terrible has happened to them. They've been killed. They're in like judicial registers or on plantation schedules, et cetera, et cetera. So the idea that there's like that somebody like Cécile Fatiman or someone like Marie Laveau can exist in this kind of like multiplicity of narratives without it just being like this person was a Black woman in this time period who was enslaved or killed in this horrible way, I think is actually a gift.
Wow, I love that idea. That the archive or the historical record is it's so limiting. It's kind of a prison in and of itself, especially with Black women's identities, that existing beyond it is sort of flipping it, is defying it as this like sort of vastness that can't be trapped by it. I love that.
That's magic. They did that.
That's magic. Oh, good. We figured it out. Okay, so I want to come back to Lucille Clifton. I think this brings us back there beautifully. And I'm going to save my outpourings about Lucille Clifton. I didn't know her at all, and I'll definitely reach back out to you and do an episode about her for a future Missing Witches episode, because I'm totally in love with her writing and her story. But so I want to quote this from what you wrote about Clifton, and then I'm just going to ask you to just talk, please, more, because it's so beautiful. So Dr. Magloire writes, in Clifton's view, it's no accident that her body and its specificities became a channel for the spirits. In her writing, being a Black woman is a way of listening, a radical form of receptiveness to the lessons that history teaches. And as her daughter Sydney puts it, I think her actual gift was her openness and her ability to hear. And then you continue, Lucille Clifton's spirit writing makes the pangs of my own embodiment as a Black woman easier to bear, amid constant reminders of the perils of Black embodiment. There is solace in the idea that this brown skin and these wide hips were made for listening to the voices that could not be erased by time, history, or death. Oh, my body, make of me always a woman who listens. And I just felt shattered and uplifted by that. And I just wondered if you would think out loud about it more for us, this idea of being made for listening and the solace that it can bring for you and maybe for some of our listeners.
Oh, yeah. Thank you. Thanks for picking out that idea, because that's something that I'm still thinking with a lot. Especially, oh, wow, where do I want to go with this? There's so many places to go with that. On the one hand, because and this was definitely like a thing as I was writing this article and talking with Sydney was like, I don't know if we feel comfortable right now, like with everything that's going on politically right now, of like you writing an article that basically says, like being Black is important, but not really cosmically or whatever. So I tried to be really careful about that, because, that is the paradox. I think that the experiences of Black womanhood are so important and have so much to teach the world. Like the Combahee River Collective says, if Black women were free, that would necessitate the destruction of all the systems of oppression. If Black women were free, everybody could be free. So I deeply believe that. But then I also deeply believe that, we're made out of heavier elements that have their origin in the Big Bang. And and in Lucille Clifton's cosmology, she wasn't a Black woman. She wasn't even a woman for many of her incarnations. And this particular incarnation, I think, was chosen for a reason. She chose to come as a Black woman to do this work, I think. But then at the same time, especially since I feel like a sense of exhaustion right now, even just the way that all of my writing, it feels like, has to be about being Black. And I feel like the way that everybody relates to me is about being Black. And I'm just what could I be doing with that mental space, or doing with my emotional life, if I could think about something beyond being Black and being a Black woman? What would my mental space look like if I could think about the history of humanity and the history and, the future of the planet and things like that, which Lucille Clifton totally does as a Black woman, but kind of beyond being a Black woman as well. Yeah. She has these, I don't know if I included it in the thing that I wrote, but I've written about it elsewhere, I guess, is she, the messages that she got from these ethereal spirits called the Ones, were kind of warning her that the Earth was in grave peril, basically, because, and, the timeline maps onto our own timeline. This is kind of our last chance to save the planet. And she also wrote a series of poems about those messages that are just really ominous in a certain kind of way, because they're like, the waters you have poisoned, you will drink when you come again, and you will come again. It's really, it's some really dark stuff, but then it's also, kind of positing the existence of other worlds and life on other worlds. It's don't think that you are the favorite child of the universe or the only child of the universe, Earthlings. I really love that. So I think something I just love about Lucille Clifton is that she she both exhibits like why Black women, like the experiences of Black women that can kind of open us up to these messages, like open us up to the potential to like save the planet because of the way that the systems of oppression that are destroying the planet are, you know, trying to destroy us as well. But she also just allows us to, allows us to think about where we're from and where we're going on this cosmic scale that includes not just all humans, but, you know, like beings in the universe that we might never have even, that we can't even fathom.
Yeah. I love so much the idea of being a body attuned for listening. I think that's the part that is going to echo, one of the parts that's going to echo with me for a long time. I mean, I've thought about it in a different context as, you know, about chronic pain. I sort of feel like having experienced like chronic pain that tuned me in a way, like it, and that like that made me able to see something. So I connect with the idea, and I think that's why we try to do this Missing Witches work of like trying to listen, is like there are so many insights missing, you know, from our unique bodies.
Yeah.
And that's how we save the world.
Yeah. Yes. Oh.
Okay, I like to end by asking guests, and if something comes to mind, then wonderful, and if it doesn't, you're off the hook and I'll edit this part out. But if you have a ritual, a practice, I think you've named some already that people will connect with, but a meditation, something you're doing in your life that's helping you survive, replenish, get through these times, something that our listeners could carry with them. You talked about visiting cemeteries and choosing somebody to give a birthday present to. I think that's kind of a lovely one. I think spirit writing from Lucille Clifton is a beautiful one. Or the mantra that you end with, to make me always a woman who listens, is one that I'll carry with me. So you've already shared a number, but so I think you have many of these in you. But if you have another one that comes to mind for a closer.
Let me see. I don't know if any of mine are like as zingy as those. I will say, I don't know, I'm like a big weirdo, and like if I had my own religion, it would be made out of like Lucille Clifton poems and like Carl Sagan quotes. Like really love Carl Sagan and have gotten really into space recently. I bought binoculars, and I go and I usually go stargazing like on this one particular beach, like the southernmost point of South Point. So I don't know. I mean, I definitely encourage people to think about space and to think about the kind of cosmic dust that we are all made of and that we will all be again someday. Carl Sagan often writes about how people find that depressing. I don't find that depressing at all. I find it like really soothing and anxiety relieving, and empowering in a way too. So that's kind of been part of my spiritual practice lately, stargazing and thinking about myself, I guess, as like one like tiny little neuron in in the universe.
I'll take that. I think a lot of us can take that right now. And I love the idea of a religion somewhere in between Lucille Clifton and Carl Sagan. I think that about summarizes a lot of my interests as well.
You must be a witch.
Hey friends, if after listening you find you want a little coven loving in your life, check out our sponsor, Foxglove Farm. Use offer code Missing Witches to get some of that handmade, ethical, awesome witchy goodness in your life. We always love hearing from you, so send us your reviews on whatever podcast service you use. And if you want to read the book, gosh, we'd love to send it to you. So find it, tell us what you think, and share your thoughts on Amazon or Goodreads. And yeah, see you out there. We love you. Be safe. Blessed if I can be.